Welcome to another episode of On the Issues with Alon Ben-Meir. Today's guest is Michael Bedenbaugh, a political analyst and author whose latest book, Reviving Our Republic, 95 Theses for the Future of America, argues the need for political renewal in the United States and presents recommendations for such reforms in a historical context. Mike's diverse background includes 5 years of service in the U.S. Navy, as well as previously serving as President and Executive Director of Preservation South Carolina, working to protect and preserve the state's historic places. In this episode, Alon and Mike discuss American politics, the impact of the ill-fated war on Iran on the United States and the damage it has done to the country's alliances, what we can expect to see in a post-Donald Trump country, the current divisions within the United States, and how we can heal this great divide.
Well, good morning to you, Michael. I'm so delighted to have you for the second time, no less. Oh, wonderful to have you. Really, this is especially nowadays when so much is going on here in the United States, around the world, specifically in the Gulf. We would like to focus on a number of issues specifically related to. I want to touch a little bit on what's going on with the war in Iran, and then hopefully we'll also be able to touch on some of the impact of the Trump's cut of various social programs on the poor, on the disabled, and then we'll also pick up on a few things about what I see, given that we are in the midst of a political campaign, the horror that I'm witnessing day in and day out in terms of the financing of all these political campaigns and the horrific consequences of that, given that when you raise enough money, you're going to be elected regardless of your qualification. And this is the kind of thing I think our audience, our listener would like to see what you have to say, because you have personal experience as a politician, as an author, a celebrated author at that. Before we do so, I'd like to introduce you very briefly once again to our listeners. Michael Bedenbaugh is a political analyst and author whose latest book, Reviving Our Republic. This is really a great book, because I read it and it was fascinating, and it is way overdue, for every American who cares about this country to read it, because it is way overdue to undertake the kind of reforms he's talking about. So he argues for the need to political renewal in the United States and present recommendation for such reform in a historical context. My diverse background includes 5 years of service in the U.S. Navy, as well as previously serving as President and Executive Director of Preservation South Carolina, working to protect and preserve the state's historic places. And so more I can say about Michael. Thank you again for joining me this morning, and I'm so really delighted. So, Mike,
Alon, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in the same room with you, even if there is a 1,000-mile difference. I appreciate it very much.
You're so welcome, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in New York.
Yes,
soon,
hopefully sooner than later.
If not, otherwise I'll make converge on Carolinas.
That'd be awesome.
So, Mike, I just wanted to give us a little brief about what do you see an unfolding horrific events that are taking place now in connection with the war against Iran. Now the Strait of Hormuz is closed again. Trump, every other hour, is making a different kind of statements in connection with this war, what is going on. It keeps threatening, there's a ceasefire, then there's no ceasefire. And now he's saying we're going to take over the Strait of Hormuz, we're going to charge 20%. I mean, it's a complete mess as it can get. And of course, now the price of gasoline is up again. So what's your take?
This will be seen as the most catastrophic miscalculation by a major power since that shot fired in Sarajevo that started World War I. Now, I'm not saying this would lead to a world war, but there is a trajectory. If this thing isn't managed, could be a slippery slope easily, because the incompetence that led to this administration to think they could manage something this complex, the demonization of a very advanced society that's a very intellectual and smart and strategic society. These people in the Persians have been playing chess with the great powers for 3,000 years.
That's right. That's right.
And these, and I will say it, these imbecilic children that are here running our nation right now because of a reaction to fear and it could be catastrophic, and it has handed more power to Iran now than they ever had. And it's tragic. It has set back relations and opportunities for reform in Iran another 2 generations. Easily.
Exactly. Yeah, when I was listening to the news this morning, and I recall reading very carefully the agreement, the so-called agreement, peace agreement between Iran and the United States, and I recall very well how I mean, to say it's terrible, to say it's completely ambiguous in an agreement. I mean, just specifically in relation and connection with the Strait of Hormuz, and it says that Iran will do its best to open the lanes, to open the Hormuz for free shipping. It's best. But the Iranian, from their perspective, our best is we're going to allow ships to go through this section closest to Iran, where they can control what is going on. And well, now we know the consequences. So the language was ambiguous. It was done in a rush. The negotiators, specifically Kushner, Witkoff, I mean, these people, what the heck do they know about negotiations, let alone negotiating about such complex issues as nuclear program, or for that matter, any kind of long-term relationship with Iran, and to think that you can set two real estate guys to negotiate with the most sophisticated negotiators anywhere,
Yeah.
Iranian. I mean, it is outrageous to say that it.
It's
And
ludicrous. It's
and
amazing.
it's a surprise. Now we find ourselves where we find ourselves today. So where do you think this is going to go? I mean,
That's the tragedy. No one knows except Iran knows what they have to lose, which is less by the day, in the sense of the risk. They understand they have the greatest superpower in the planet over a barrel. And we put the barrel in front of us and we laid over it and said, here, look how, thinking we're going to have this barrel roll over them. And I tell you, Alon, what is tragic for me is the future of Iran and the stability of Iran and how we've lost that opportunity, and it's gone. I was in Russia in 1990, and I saw the outcome of patient diplomacy and what that did for the people of Russia in 1990, and the homes that were opened up to me, and the dinners I had with people, and how these people were so eager to have Americans in their lives. Now, that has been compromised with the latest Putin's regime, but at that time, I felt an embrace I could have never imagined. And I would remember Rick Steves did a wonderful program from Iran in 2011, shortly after Obama had entered into negotiations. And I heard the same conversations with Rick Steves. Rick Steves having dinner with these people that I had in Russia. And how these people thought the regime that was over them was ludicrous with all these bombs dropping on Tehran. Well, now the regime was proven right.
absolutely.
They were proven right. And all I could think of was seeing all these young college students saying, we would like to be your friends. That has been devalued to the point of where there's no coming back from it now, at least in our lifetime, I'm afraid.
Yeah. The irony is that the whole discussion today is about reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Well, when in fact the Strait of Hormuz was opened before the war.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at best, we can go back to the status that existed before the war, which is so. And what Iran has discovered as a result of this ill-fated war of choice is that they have discovered the new weapon. All of it could be temporary for 3, 4, 5 years, but the weapon that can control the flow of 20% of the oil consumption around the world. And we know now, we're seeing day in, day out, the result of what this the newly discovered power that they have, and they are going to use it to the maximum they can, and they will continue to do so. And then,
Absolutely.
and there's another thing, if I may, Iran knows its history. They know these are proud people. This is not a country that you can go and conquer.
Mm-mm.
The Mongols failed. Alexander the Great. This is not so. For Trump, even he cannot even contemplate thinking for a second to send real ground troops to go to Iran. That is going to be a slaughter. That's not going to
Yeah.
happen. So
Yeah.
his options are limited. And now, of course, they feel free. They are attacking our American bases in the Gulf, in various Arab countries in the Gulf states. And so he is now, in my view, in a real box. What do you think he can? What are his options? What can he do at this point?
That's the tragedy. He doesn't have many. Well, here's the other element of this is the empowerment of China.
Right?
This has handed China the keys to being the global superpower in 10 years because China
If
has
not before, sir, even before that, I really think you're absolutely right. I don't think it takes 10 years already.
well,
I think,
I agree.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, China one has billions and billions of gallons of fuel in reserve holding. They can affect they have been planning for this for
Yeah.
years. Another strategic ancient culture who understands how to play chess and understands strategic leverage. And we're just amateurs with it. We're still on the world stage. We have shown ourselves to all our friends. We're nothing but the spoiled teenagers having a hissy fit over what we're not getting and not getting keys to the car. And that's what the rest of the world is seeing. And what we're seeing is the de-evolution of us being a world power to being a participant. The key is, and here's the thing that most concerns me, is as our influence lessens, the reaction among people here who will fight that and think we can only attain it through war to try to get it back. And that's the type of reaction that will be devastating for our nation a lot more than any other.
Absolutely. And I think what Trump has done, the damage that he has done to the United States is probably irreparable. But what we're looking at today, our allies, European allies, has basically come to the conclusion, well, we can forgive America for electing this guy once, not twice, and they're walking away. Now they are all now trying to find, for example, their own kind of defenses. They are augmenting their own. They basically, from their perspective, is a permanent rupture, and they're going to have to take care of themselves and depend less and less on the United States, albeit it may take a year or two or three, but that's the direction. Is a no return to the status quo that existed before. So America, it's lost not its influence, it's a glamour, but its influence in the long
Yes.
term. So how and do you think that, and Trump is, of course, time takes its own toll, or Trump is not going to be here forever. I mean, and I just like to hope, sometimes like to hope that what can happen is there any hope post-Trump that he
The
begins some kind
problem,
of
the problem,
recovery?
yeah, the problem with empowering Donald Trump that has happened, it has also created a coagulation of an authoritarian streak that we have had in this nation ever since our founding.
Yeah,
I come from a place where my grandparents' generation had a very strong authoritarian streak in ensuring Jim Crow and the
yeah,
citizens of black folks in our community was suppressed so they could have a stable labor force. Well, that same authoritarian streak that has been dispersed a little. Everybody had an HOA head who was an authoritarian regarding your grass and a school principal and such as that. But what's happened now is all of these people have coalesced around a movement that is not going away. And even though Donald Trump goes away, um, it will still be here because I haven't seen it diminish. I've seen number of people, some of the people in the middle that kind of voted for Trump because they couldn't even imagine voting for a Democrat. Um, they have softened and just hoping for another candidate and somebody else to bring back a status quo. But there's a group of people that won't let that happen. And that's
Right.
what worries me the most. They're here to stay for a while.
Yeah, in this connection, I just want to switch and we can talk about this horrific situation for hours. And I don't think either I or you could come up with any. Okay, this is a formula. This is what we can do for the next 2.5 years. We're going to have to continue to suffer horrific consequences of this idiocy that's been displayed day in and day out, coming from the White House. But what perpetuating this state of sad affairs in American politics, is a campaign financing.
Yeah.
Campaign financing, in my view, this is one of the most corrupt systems that possibly exists. And that is, and I'd like to tell us a little bit of my own experience. That is, nowadays, the best and the brightest are not being elected, because if you don't have enough money, you're not going to be enough. So who's being elected? Those are able to raise money from various sources. And so, in my view, as long as there's no significant, and this is your field in particular, this is part of the reform we're talking about, that is, unless there's a significant reform in terms of the campaign, um, um, how to manage campaigns, we are not going to see a rise of a generation of bright young men and women who can rise to the occasion and say, now we're going to be at the helm and lead America. So do you see any prospect, given we are in the midst of a midterm election, it's coming soon, and I mean every single day I must get about 10 different emails or text messages asking for money, and where do you see that's going? I mean, because unless there are some kind of reforms, we are stuck with the less than average people who are still going to come back again to the fore and be in control of the government. What do you say?
Well, I come from a perspective of actually running for Congress. I ran as an independent, really forced to run as an independent in my district, the third district, which is one of the most conservative districts in the country. This is the district that created Lindsey Graham. Okay. This is district Lindsey Graham came out of as a representative. And but I see the hegemony of the Republican system here breaking a little bit. I mean, this party that we have here in South Carolina was created by Strom Thurmond and Lee Atwater, and they created a political machine that is almost unbreakable. And so I would have run as a Republican, and I probably would have been able to be in the primary, but the machinery of them selecting and putting money into who they want would have made it impossible. So I ran on the Alliance Party, and they had a very heated primary. One of the leaders in the State House Freedom Caucus that had tons of friends had run, was in the primary. He came in fourth place. It shocked everybody. Donald Trump endorsed Mark Burns, who was a minister that was here, and he endorsed him. But then when Mark Burns lost, he switched his endorsement to a woman named Sherry Biggs. In the last 4 months of the campaign, when all the polls showed Sherry was going to win, she ended up collecting $500,000 on top of what she already had, most of that from out of state PACs. If you look at her list, because of the law that allows people to take their election funds that was given to them and transfer them to another candidate, she was getting flooded with monies. She ended up raising a total of $900,000 in this little district.
Wow.
And the thing is about her, she's probably one of the most inarticulate and incompetent people that has ever been elevated to a House district in this state. I mean, bless her heart, she's as sweet as she could be, and I've met her several times, but she could barely do a speech when she first got in front of
Right.
people in Prosperity at a round table.
Right.
And a friend of mine who is really big in the Christo nationalism movement, who I was hoping would help me, ended up secretly coaching her on how she should, how to speak to people.
Right.
And she's there only because she's a puppet to the money. So during that time is when I created my, as you know, my 95 thesis, and that turned into the book, my platform. And there is a way to stop all this.
Right.
And there is an amendment in place to stop it, but it's being ignored because Democrats have put it up. And that fix is to um, differentiate in the Constitution the difference between natural persons and artificial personas. Because right now, Citizens United took in the legal platform that corporations were people,
Yeah.
which is true technically for financial purposes and sovereignty of the person and of corporations. But we've got to differentiate that now in the Constitution. And unless that's done, it won't fix. But that if that was done, we could fix it then, because then the next step is what I was proposing was only people that can vote for you can give you money for your campaign, and
Right.
that will require an amendment. That will fix it, but it's going to be a long way to get there because there's a lot of money involved in power.
Yeah, you know, in various democracies, for example, in Israel and some European countries, when there's an election, there is appropriation of funds by the government given equally to all the parties. That is, there's a certain sum of money they can spend in any way they want to spend it. There's an allocation for primaries, for example, and then there's allocation, a certain amount is given for the final two candidates to run. And so there is no outside money coming, you know, I'll give you so much if you do A, B, C, and D for me. And that's not happening. I mean, this is one way many of the European communities, basically have managed to control, to make sure that the better people actually get elected rather than those who have more money to spend.
If I
But
could, I want to tell you,
yeah,
I
yeah,
interviewed
please.
the Green Party gubernatorial candidate here yesterday, and I'm going to air that next week. And he brought that up, that that's an effective way. My only concern with that is considering how our nation's culture deals with government money. Um, we talk a big talk of how we don't want government money, especially the right wing, but whenever they do take it, they corrupt it. And the corruptible ability of government paying candidates concerns me a little bit in this country. So I don't know if our culture can accommodate that or not, and that's my only concern. But
Well,
if it works, it works. You know.
it's not like the government is giving money equally to
Yes, I understand.
I mean, it's equal amount. So it's not like it's a Republican government is going to give more money to the Republican candidates. They have them by law, they were required to give exactly the same amount. I mean, this is something perhaps you and I need to rehash and
Yeah.
and write a piece. No, seriously, I'm the piece of the subject because I think extremely important. That is, if we don't clean our act here when it comes to political campaign financing, we are not going to see the kind of people that really want to see to rise to power where they can actually clean this, end the corruption. I mean, uh, put America back on the path where it should be,
Yeah.
and restore the dignity, the power, the influence, the benevolence America was able to project over so many decades, and such for that. And it's to me. I mean, I wasn't born here, and I came to this country. To me, this is fulfilling the American dreams. There's nothing like it. To this day, I feel one of the most blessed individuals to realize the American dream. And I see it now is sort of, withering away. And it's saddened me to no end to see that.
Well, Alon, that's the beauty of what immigration does to this nation. It refreshes the well. And it's wonderful to hear you say that because so many people like myself who have lived here, whose families have lived here for generations, um, has lost touch with the importance of the blessing because yes, they think they're the best nation in the world, but they really don't know why except they're just here. And
Right.
and folks that have counted on that American dream that was really elevated in post World War II. That sense of America being the heroes that finished the war in Europe, that set up a peaceful system, at least within Europe in some states. That and also just the opportunities we gave folks coming in, and for folks like you who watch it disintegrating, is a window into this, that we need your voice more on things like this, who communicate it, because a lot of people really don't understand what they're giving up.
I mean, yeah, I mean, especially I lived in so many different countries. I lived in the Middle East, I lived in Israel, I lived in Europe, and I've seen it. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in all of these societies. And I tell you honestly, when I landed here, literally I kneel and I kiss, and I really mean that with my tears running. I said,
Oh,
I have come to this promised land. I really mean that in every sense. I mean, like it was happening yesterday. That was more than 50 years ago. And now, when I was, and as I watch now the Trump, what the Trump administration is doing, what Trump in particular is doing, I weep sometimes. I cry. Is it possible? Is it possible that this country, the glamour, the beauty, the power, the outreach, the resourcefulness, is it possible that this country would allow itself to be governed by a lunatic, by someone who all he is doing is trying to enrich himself at the expense of the poor? And look what he is doing to America today in terms of various social programs, which like to get your opinion on some of that. You know, he came in, you know, with his Project 25. All he's done is giving more and more money to the rich and taking away. I mean, how can you possibly justify? And please address this, because this is to me extremely painful to watch. Cutting these social programs. Can you enlighten our listeners what he has done in
well,
cutting social programs,
thank you. Well, let me back up a little bit onto the DNA of America.
please?
The America that people in the inner, like yourself, growing up overseas and wanting to come here in the post-World War America, I would argue that was an anomaly in American history. That we became a world power, that we had this hegemony of that people would follow and let us set up a world system, was something that, one, the DNA of our Constitution never was equipped to handle. It was never equipped to handle that. Never even thought that would happen. And so what we have happening now is, because of the systems that are needed to control that hegemony, are opposite of the systems needed to create an a place where individual liberty and the pursuit of happiness of individuals within their communities could thrive. They're two different systems. And slowly, over, I would say, since World War I and since a lot of the reforms in 1917, we have devolved into a more centrally controlled nation, and that leads us vulnerable to all these social programs that used to be in place among the states, which really did a good job, except for the fatal flaw of our history of enslavement and Jim Crow in the South. Okay, the race
Right.
issue was a taint to that sense of aspiration. But take that um, aside, it was it worked. In South Carolina, we had one of the first asylums, and now the word asylum's a bad one, but it was one of the most advanced mental health facilities in the world that was put in Columbia, South Carolina in 1825. You know, um, the state government spent a lot of money, and then when public education came after the Civil War, money went into that. Yes, Jim Crow had separated it, but those things had to be worked through, and they were resolved. But what has happened now is, where the states were responsible for those social welfare programs has now been centralized into the federal government through the income tax. So all our money flows here, and then every state has to beg for money back. And so that corrupts that system, because then you're not electing um, leaders and character driven leadership, you're hiring salesmen to try to get money. When I ran for Congress, the most consistent question I had from political leadership of the towns was, how much money will you deliver back to us? Because they cannot now redo their town square or get lighting that they need without getting federal money.
Right.
And that has been the worst thing to corrupt that. So now with that involved, with that politicization of that money involved, it creates a vacuum where the leadership then coalesces, and then it becomes a political football back between. So instead of having 50 states with that discussion, I imagine it the pendulum on a clock. You know, instead of 50 little clocks with little pendulums working with their own time, we now have one giant pendulum that everything's dependent on. And this swinging back and forth is what is creating the trauma that makes us try to protect what the other one is doing. So from my perspective, I see that as the root of the core evil of how we've politicized this. In fact, if I could, I was
Please.
listening to Trump make a speech about windmills, and he even
Right.
said, well, here's our policy for 4 years. So he admitted what he's doing will only last until the next president comes in.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can't exist that way. That's
Right.
what Europe's getting tired of, and they
Right.
see the problem with that.
So let's delve a little bit more into this. So what are these cuts, for example, also so the various social programs, specifically the healthcare, the subsidies has been provided by the Obama healthcare program, and then what Trump is trying to do, basically destroyed from day one, and finally has been able to do so, and so many other cuts, scientific, appropriation for scientific this research and all of that's going to universities, and I mean it's just endless.
Yeah.
Don't you think to fix this, take this back to the state, that the state will have to I mean the state can collect income tax, for example, from, like in New York City, there is state income tax, you have to pay
Right.
to the state. Wouldn't that be better? We're talking about this state be able to control all these social programs. We are living in a state, we're paying taxes to the state, and divorce itself from the federal government. And in so doing, the state themselves will be able to compete with one another, who can
Yes.
provide even a better program, and to
Yes.
make it more attractive for Americans to move from one state to another, because they feel where they. So this way, you're going to create competition. You're going
Yep.
to create better and better program. What do you think? I mean, you're writing about this subject. We want to collaborate on something along these lines. What do you think?
Oh, that's exactly several of my theses. I mean, my income tax is, well, as you, I don't know what you are in New York, but my income tax in South Carolina, 2/3 of it goes to the feds, 1/3 stays here. It goes to the state of South Carolina, along with property tax, which is another corrupted system that's been corrupted here in our state, especially. So, and this is a generational change that has to figure out. Um, I don't see how to change it unless we ultimately get rid of the federal income tax, because the federal income tax is there, it will be corrupted perpetually because of it being an automatic giant pipeline of grabbing money out of people's pockets before they even see it. And 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 that's nothing that can be done immediately, of course, and we have to be careful with that, on how to plan that, because the income tax here in the states is I think legitimate, and there's other ways for revenue, but because of the automatic money funneling into the federal government is what has empowered it to just feed and feed the monster. And now look where we are in debt. Because of the knowledge that we'll always be getting this money, these people have put us in the same debt ratio that we were at the end of World War II, even worse. And now we're not a world hegemonic power creating all the stuff like we were in 1950. It's putting us in a bad way. So that's a long-term solution. We have to start looking at. Here's one of the things too. When people talk to me, when I mention this, they say, "Well, states' rights is a flawed philosophy." Well, I agree with them, because I don't look at it as states' rights. Everybody in America talks about rights as if it's some sort of benevolent thing that we're owed without any responsibility. States' rights without responsibility is chaos. And so I look at it as state responsibility. Constitutionally, the states are the ones that are separate and have separate responsibilities. And just to tangent a little bit, that is exactly why I am so concerned about the Save America Act with centralizing the voting system. That's part of what the federal government's doing, is destroying federalism. And that's another way of extracting more resources and power out of the states, because the states are the only real check on power in Washington, and the party system is destroying it.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to go? I mean, Trump is still insisting on getting this the Save America Act to go through. So far, the majority leader in the Senate, Senator Toon, is it? Because you
Thank
have
goodness.
to eliminate the filibuster, I understand, in order to be able to pass that. Otherwise, do you think there's any prospect of actually passing this? Because I think the consequences of that will be horrific in this midterm election. What's your take
Unfortunately,
on that?
unfortunately, we have such a consumptive society where they just consume what makes them feel good, and the political parties and the apparatus has done a good job of rhetorically packaging this as keep our election safe, right? And so everybody hits a poll. Yes, I want my election safe. And they're manipulating that to say, and I tell people, I'm like, the same Americans are in the states that you're saying wants it. So let the states have and protect them. And plus, there's no evidence it's not, but that's been manipulated too. So it could happen. I see the trend of where something like this could happen. And if it does, it'll be devastating for federalism, and it will give more power to the federal government. The founders will be rolling over in their graves. It's probably one of the most dangerous acts that could happen in the history of our nation since we had Reconstruction and trying to give the right to vote to freed slaves. This is going to be a devastating outcome.
But since this is taking actually the power from the states that
Yes.
control elections. Why aren't they, say, the governors of the 50 states are standing up and saying, no, we will not allow that? I mean, why we're not hearing from the governors, who basically taking the power away from them, the federal government, by saying we have to decide on something that the state's been controlling all this time.
Well, we're hearing that from the Democratic governors, and that's what's happening. The nationalization of our political party system has lessened the sovereignty of the states within the federal government, and it's eroded it to where it's gone. And that's why one of my theses also addresses the fact that that started happening when the states gave up the ability to appoint senators, because originally senators were not popularly elected. They were appointed by the state legislators to represent the state government, the
Right.
member of the federal government. And when that went away under this populist sense of we want more democracy, which is a nice notion, but what they did was they created one mob that the House. I never forget, there's this great story when Jefferson came back from France and he asked Washington, why did you have a bicameral legislature? It should be a unicameral, just one legislature. And Washington gave this famous story of the hot coffee in the cup needs to be poured into the saucer to cool, right? And that's what the Senate was to be. They were to be the institutional guard to short-term reaction by mob, right? That people can get caught up in the trauma and drama of something and the passions, short-term passions. And the Senate was to be a stabilizing keel, the ballast to that. That's gone now. And that will be a harder thing to do too, because of the belief that if we do that, we compromise democracy. I think it's the only way to make it fit. We have to empower reason for states to counter the feds, and that's the only way we can do it.
Now, what do you see now on this campaign now? Of course, the Save America's Act is still pending. It may or may not go through at the end. What's your what do your projection? What do you see this election going to lead to? I mean, various polls, consistently, Times are basically surveys half a dozen polling institution suggesting that the Democrats would certainly be able to take back the House. There's even now in the wake of the sudden death of Senator Graham, that maybe even the Senate is in play. How do you see that from where you're sitting?
It's fascinating, Elon, because I don't know. It could go any number of ways. Um, what I don't see is a reform movement happening within the House. The hope that I had with my book was, and I'm still hoping we can create something here in the next month, to where House members can create a fulcrum caucus within the House. I mean, 10 people in the House can control the House if they're thinking the same way outside of party politics. That's the only way we're going to try to help create a balance back in the House and in Congress. That's not corporate driven, corporatized, party driven agendas that have a national scope instead of allowing local scope to happen. This is going to be one of the most fascinating elections we've ever had since our Civil War. And I don't mean that to mean it would lead to it, but I mean it, the trauma, the infighting, the lack of people talking to each other is very similar to what was going on in 1850s. There's a famous story, one of our representatives, when the Massachusetts Sumner representative stood up and called slavery the harlot of South Carolina, basically referring South Carolinians and prostitution, which was such a offense to our honor that our representative, Preston Brooks, went and almost beat him to death on the floor.
Wow.
And what he got for that was he got a gift of several thousand new canes because he broke his cane. And that's the type of division we had then. I see this trajectory could lead to that because I see the same people saying the same things, and it's concerning.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like just to sort of play a little two possible scenario with you.
Okay.
Let us say that the midterm election will lead to the Democrats taking over the House, but the Senate will remain under the control of the Republicans. How do you interpret that? What do you see is going to happen subsequent to that in terms of America, of Trump standing, what he can or can do, cannot do? Where do you see that? What would be the consequences of that? The immediate one, given that he would have the power of the purse, he'd probably been frozen. He will not be able to get what he wants unless the Congress, of course, appropriate this money. Where do you see that going? I'd
Well,
like to put this scenario first.
here's what I hope I don't see coming. And as much as I'd love to have the personal satisfaction of, because I think real crimes have happened with this administration. And if there's any reason for impeachment to happen, it's what has occurred. However, because of the state the nation is in, I would be concerned if we do have a Democratic majority in both houses. Let's just say we happen to pull off the Democrats happen to pull off the Senate. I don't mean to say I'm nonpartisan on that. But if the Democrats come in, if they immediately go to try to prosecute and impeach, it would be a terrible precedent. We have to fix it through law and through the fact that the president's policies are still very popular among his folks. And if they go down the road of impeachment, I see violence in the legislature. I see irreparable division. And especially since they've already tried to do it twice and they couldn't do it. I see it as a waste of time. But what they need to do is then focus on the constitutionality of the checks and balances and push that and let that be pushed into the Supreme Court. I do not agree with what many people think the Supreme Court has been over politicized to where they're not making good decisions anymore. I just finished going through probably 50 Supreme Court decisions, and a lot more are 100% agreed upon than just a division. There's the Supreme Court will be the check on this, but they need to go through a proper processes of budgeting and reaffirm that. And I hope they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to talk about the Supreme Court. I mean, I'd like to ask you this question because I think one decision with which I totally disagree with is, basically give Trump almost complete impunity. He can do pretty much what he wanted to do. But I just want to go back to the initial question. But either the Democrats or not, even if they win the Senate, they're probably by one seat or two.
Yeah.
To impeach him to get the verdict from the Senate, they require 60%, and that's not going to happen. Which means if they go through the impeachment process in the House, it's going to be an exercise of futility. Yes, it will pass the House, but will be stuck in the Senate just like it was before.
That's
So
right.
that would be a foolish thing to do in the first place. But I want just to take this a little further with you. So short of, let's say they wise up and decided, no, this is another way to go, follow what you're suggesting. Let's do something else. What else can they, in fact, do in order to put some kind of check and balance about what's going on in terms of what's
Well, it's
happening?
all built into, the withholding of funds, not, you know, not passing budgets, that cutting back on monies going to the um, administration. All of those things are there, and they will vote against it. The problem is, with a split Senate, it won't allow it. And I actually see, if the House goes to be majority Democrat, I can see a scenario of mistrust in the elections being so pushed that
Yeah,
we will have civil disorder in some states. I've been saying before that the January 6th issue that happened in 2020, I could see the potential for numerous smaller January 6th issues in states where states will be concerned. And I know there are some people, I've spoken to some of these people who are planning for that. So there's a potential for us going into a chaotic time. Um, and it's concerning, but this nation will not heal until it gets to the pain point of where everybody, the majority of people, say enough. We must end, and
we're
we
gonna
must
have to go.
start having civil ways of disagreeing.
It has. You mean it's gonna have to peak in a serious breakdown? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It's gonna and may very well be violent at that.
I think there will be elements of that. I mean, we saw that when the Republicans were in charge and pushing ICE into Minnesota. I mean, that type of violence, that type of street violence being protected, these people being pardoned, is a huge message. And there's a lot of people who know this president will pardon them if they commit violence in the name of election fraud,
Right,
protecting the elections. Um, he'll pardon them. And
right.
that's the most dangerous thing that we can be going into, and that's what's concerning me of what can happen.
Yeah, I know we're talking about hypotheticals, but I just want to continue with that because there's so much speculation about what will happen if the Democrat control one house or both houses. Let's just take it a little further. Suppose they manage to control the Senate as well by maybe one, maximum about two, if that.
Hmm.
What do you think then is going to happen in terms of, obviously, again, impeachment is not going to be in the card because it will not pass through the Senate. So where do you think that might take the country to?
Well, here's the thing about that. I don't think impeachment should be in the cards because it's illogical. But
Right,
to the
right,
party, Democratic Party apparatus, for people in the House to show how stern they are against this president, they'll do it. Just because, even if they know the Senate won't, they'll be able to put that on their resume for 2028. So that's the problem. Lindsey Graham did that, ran impeachment against Clinton when he knew it would lose, but it sure did make him it reinforced his status with his constituents here in South Carolina. And so that's the concern. Now, if they don't, it'll just be a lot of lively debates, and I'm just hoping we can start having some Democratic leadership that can put on full display they're not all communist leftists trying to take over America. They're just human beings, they're just citizens who are looking at how best to have a nation as diverse as ours working in a way where social programs are taken care of and commerce can happen. That's what most of these Democrats are wanting. And I'm hoping they have enough leadership that's articulate enough to communicate that to help make sure it mitigates the far right talking points that have been weaponized so badly.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk that Trump is working very hard to trying to adopt all kind of measures and try to ensure that the Democrats will not win the House. And we're talking about the potentially even invoking the Resurrection Act, maybe declaring martial law. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these are all going on, these kind of discussion. What do you think the Democrats or American patriots today, not just Democrats, just Republican, also are concerned about the future of this country, ought to be doing between now and the election time to prevent this from happening? That is to ensure that at least the election will be somewhat peaceful and legitimate. Because I mean, it is a given that if the result is what we think is going to happen, potentially that the Democrats take over the House, Trump is going to declare it, to have been rigged, needless to say. But what measures do you feel need to be considered now, realistically speaking? And that's really been occupying. What can we do in order to awaken the American public to make sure, look, this something like this can happen? What steps to your knowledge, are the Democrats or anyone is taking specific steps, think in terms of how to prevent this type potentially terrible disruption might take place and to prevent that from happening?
Well, how we prevent it is good people, no matter their political affiliation, following the rule of law. And that happened in 2020 when we had, and I'm sorry, I forget his name in Georgia, who refused to give Trump the number of votes he needed. Mike Pence, who, is as far right Christian evangelical as there could be, stood at the wall and wouldn't allow to go outside the rule of law. Well, there is no Mike Pence around anymore. He was even voted, he couldn't even be reelected. The Ratzenberger down in Georgia, he's out. So what I'm going to be interested in is seeing how many of those people are still willing to stand up and and perform their duties under the rule of law versus the duty to the national party and to the party leader. And that we don't know. We don't know. And it's going to take some of that happening before there is a groundswell of people in the country to go, enough. This is going to chaos.
Yeah, but then that may be too late. I mean, don't you think there's a need right now to galvanize to mobilize this type of individual? They're there. They're there, Republicans, Democrats, patriots, Americans who really care about what's going to happen or potentially could happen. Why is there? I mean, I don't see a sort of a movement, people saying, let's be prepared, be
Well,
prepared, do something. What can be done? What do you see any of it?
I do see it among, and I don't want to say the word fringe because that diminishes it, but I do see an activist population. The No Kings rally, those organizers, all of these different people. But unfortunately, there's a lot of different silos that are isolated from each other. And I also think that the lack of civic education in our nation over the past 50 years has led people to really not understand how our government works, along with a belief that we can never be destroyed from within. America's the beautiful, America's great, we're a world power, we have the biggest Navy army in the world, we're safe, nothing's going to happen to us. It's just about who controls it. I don't think they understand or comprehend the razor blade we're walking on right now. And that's why you don't see a big push. That's why it will take a certain level of catastrophic outcome before it awakens to the fact that we could lose this nation. It could be broken up. States who could secede. And I mean, there's already people talking about that now. The Republican Party in Texas has that as one of their platforms, secession, if certain conditions aren't met.
Right. I mean, this is no question in my mind, in many minds of many. And an American empire is in decline. It is not is decline, but it's already in it. And
Yeah.
that, great empires, historically speaking, have not fallen because of outside invaders. Great empires, being the Roman, the Greeks, are all wither from within. They
Yeah.
weaken and they overstretch themselves militarily, and they hunger for more power. And basically, they wither from within. And
Hmm.
the enemy is from within that is actually destroy the great empires. And the United States may very well be no exception to that. And I think we are seeing that. That is the deterioration from within, the corruption that is taking place today. That is it's consuming this country from within. It's not the Democrats necessarily versus Republican, but the whole system. And
Yeah.
that is when you don't have enough people that say enough is enough, we arise and say we are not going to allow that to happen. So, and I don't see that taking place. That is, are we doomed already? Do you think we're doomed?
I don't
And
think we're
what's going to
doomed.
happen?
Yeah, I don't think we're doomed in the long run, but we're we're doomed. It's according to how long this goes before the rehabilitation happens. The beauty of our constitutional system and the aspiration our founders had was they understood the rise and fall of great powers. They fully understood it and they knew what caused it. They were hoping all these little checks and balances, the nation could constantly be remade. So as it starts falling, it could be rebuilt from within and move on. Those mechanisms are still there. And I think, and that's one of the motivations why I wrote my book, because I think those things could happen. It's just a case of how far is it going to go so that it can be repaired. And it may be, in Russian history, there was a time during Boris Godunov in the time of troubles, from the original after Ivan Grozny and Ivan the Terrible and Civil War, and then the Romanovs came up. They called it the time of troubles. I see us getting ready to go through a time of troubles.
Yeah.
It's different than the Civil War and something even more dangerous because instead of purely perfect sectional conflict, it's definitely more inside. Too many people, especially on the right, love showing maps of red states and blue states. And that's misinformation because South Carolina is shown as solid red, but it's 40 something percent vote Democratic.
Yeah.
That's
You
not
know,
red, that's purple.
Right. Yeah. You say talking about, of course, check and balances. We have the three branches of government. You have the Congress. You have the Supreme Court. You have the executive. And what is happening? Really, it's very clear to you, just to so many, and is that Senate, been relinquishing much of its, for example, the War Acts, been relinquishing its authority, its prerogative to the executive. So did in many situations, and we disagree probably a little bit on that. What the Supreme Court has done, also relinquishing some of its, the final words coming from there. Well, here we do. I'm very disturbed by the fact by the judgment, giving Trump this total impunity, basically. So if this balance, the check and balance is weakened, and much of this power is being relegated to the executive, that is, to me, that is a slipping slope. That's where the danger lies. Don't you see that?
Yes. Yeah, oh, absolutely. And that's why within my book, my 95 thesis, I have 40 policy points. And people talk about term limits and people talk about different things. The problem is one thing isn't going to fix it all. There has to be a new party rising, and we are in the process, we are in a space that is very similar to what was going on when Andrew Jackson was in power. The same issues when Andrew Jackson was in power led to the rise of the Whig Party that Trump is now in power,
Mhm.
that should give rise to a third party. I am hoping that my book can be a foundational conversation to look at what another party would do, a constitutional conservative one that leaves social libertarianism in place and social norms in place. And that's what's always stabilized this country. And I hope that conversation can happen before it's too late, before irreparable damage is done. already irreparable damage is done to some degree, but there's still a way out of this, and I hope to do what we can to lead to that conversation.
Well, I hope so. I can't believe it's already 1 hour now.
I had to look down. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's always so much
It,
fun,
it
and I
can't.
learned so much with you.
It's unbelievable. I was going to ask you, so we've got to continue this conversation.
I look forward to it. Alon. Thank
Mike,
you.
thank you so much again for coming on this program. I'm sure whoever was listening enjoyed that a great deal, listening to what your take on this very, extremely important, but in some cases almost fateful for our country. Where do we go from here? And let us hope that we overcome, as we have done so many times in the past. This country, I think, has that embedded in ability,
Yeah.
capacity to re-emerge anew, and
Well,
I believe that is going to happen.
I believe it too. I just welcomed my first grandchild into the world 3 weeks ago, and my
Oh,
my
congratulations!
first grandniece into the world 2 days ago. And this is about what world they inherit, and that's what citizenship is about, to do the best, and that's what we're here for.
Great, congratulations for that, and thank
Thank
you
you.
so much again. Look forward to talking to you soon. All the very best. Thank you so
You
much, Mike.
very best. Thank you, Alon. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye now. Thank you for listening to this episode on the issues. You can find this podcast on my SoundCloud page, and stay tuned to my social media accounts for the latest analysis and announcements.